February 24, 1943, 200 miles southwest of Iceland. The Atlantic heaved beneath HMS Orcus like a living thing trying to shake her apart. Lieutenant Commander commanding the Flower-class corvette gripped the bridge rail as another wave buried the bow completely. 30 feet of gray-green water crashed over the forecastle, and for 3 seconds the vessel became a submarine. Then she clawed upward, shedding tons of seawater through her scuppers, diesel smoke belching from her single funnel. The Aztec operator's voice cut through the howl of wind and engine. Contact. 800 yards, bearing red 45. Before we dive deeper into this story of the most cost-effective killers in naval history, like this video and subscribe for more untold World War II stories. Comment where you're watching from. Now, back to the North Atlantic where cheap boats proved deadlier than prestige. The Corvette turned toward the contact. Her single 4-inch gun, a relic from the Great War, pointed uselessly forward. The real weapon sat at the stern racks of depth charges. But mounted just ahead of the bridge sat something new. A steel framework holding 24 spigot mortar. The Hedgehog, a weapon that would transform submarine hunting from blind guesswork into surgical strikes. 800 yards became 600, then 400. At 250 yards, the order came. Fire! 24 projectiles arced forward, splashing into the churning sea in an elliptical pattern. 5 seconds of silence, then a muffled crack that shook the entire ocean. HMS Orcus had just become the first corvette to sink a U-boat with Britain's newest weapon. U-444 would never report back to Lorient, and in that moment, though the crew didn't yet know it, they had proven that a 90,000-pound vessel could kill submarines just as effectively as destroyers that cost $2 million. The arithmetic nightmare had begun 3 years earlier, September 1940. The Admiralty Building on Whitehall. Rows of clerks bent over ledgers, adding figures that told a story of national extinction. Every month, German U-boats sent 500,000 tons of merchant shipping to the Atlantic floor. Oil tankers, grain carriers, ammunition ships. Britain possessed roughly 200 destroyers. Magnificent vessels. 36 knots of speed, dual-purpose guns, torpedo tubes capable of sinking cruisers. Each one cost His Majesty's Treasury approximately £2 million, required 18 months to build, and needed a crew of 145 men trained since boyhood. Between September 1939 and December 1940, the Royal Navy lost 63 destroyers. Each loss meant not just steel gone, but institutional knowledge vanished. The math was brutal. Britain needed 400 escort vessels immediately to protect merchant convoys crossing the Atlantic. But 400 destroyers would bankrupt the nation and consume every shipyard for 3 years. By then, Britain would have starved. Admiral Sir Martin Dunbar Nasmyth proposed something that scandalized the naval establishment. Stop building proper warships. Build something else instead. He pointed to whale catchers operated by companies like Christian Salvesen. Unglamorous vessels that chased fin whales through Antarctic pack ice. 60 meters long, 700 tons displacement. Simple engines built to survive the Southern Ocean's storms. They looked like floating garden sheds, but they could be constructed in any yard with a slipway and a riveting team. Most importantly, their blueprints already existed. In January 1939, naval architects arrived at Smith's Dock Company in Middlesbrough with a specification that sounded absurd. Take your whale catcher design. Add a 4-inch gun. Mount depth charge rails at the stern. Install an Aztec dome beneath the keel. Keep the cost under £90,000. Keep construction time under 5 months. Forget about crew comfort. Forget about speed. Just make them float, make them cheap, and make them now. Smith's engineers delivered modified plans within 6 weeks. The design retained the whale catcher's single-screw reciprocating steam engine. Technology from 1880. That single-screw limited speed to 16 knots exactly half what a fleet destroyer could manage. Senior officers considered this disqualifying. Then someone pointed out the real numbers. Convoy merchantman steamed at 8 knots. Surfaced U-boats managed 17 knots. Submerged U-boats barely made 7 knots. A corvette didn't need to catch a surfaced submarine in a stern chase. It needed to force that submarine underwater, where its battery-powered motors transformed it from predator to crawling target. 16 knots sufficed perfectly. HMS Gladiolus became the first laid down at Smith's Dock on August 19, 1939, 13 days before Germany invaded Poland. She commissioned on April 14, 1940, 6 months from keel to operational warship. Destroyer HMS Javelin, laid down the same week, wouldn't commission until June and cost 22 times more. By Christmas 1940, 41 Flower-class corvettes patrolled the western approaches. By Pearl Harbor, that number reached 116. The yards that built them had never seen warships before. Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Collingwood Shipbuilding in Ontario, small Scottish fishing boat yards. They received blueprints and steel allocations and got to work with riveters and boilermakers. No specialist turbine machinists required. No electrical engineers for complex fire control systems. Just rivers of rivets and a willingness to abandon every peacetime standard. The hulls consisted of 3/8-inch mild steel plates. Naval architects specified straight frames and flat sections wherever possible. The result looked brutish. Squared-off stem, slab-sided hull. A stern that looked like someone had sawn off the end of a barge. But brutish meant fast to build. Harland and Wolff launched one corvette every 4 weeks once production reached full rhythm. Living aboard one meant entering a special circle of maritime hell. 62 meters long with a beam of just 10 meters. In a force-8 storm, a corvette could roll 18 degrees to port, snap back through vertical, and roll 20 degrees to starboard. This motion repeated every 6 seconds for days at a stretch. Experienced destroyer men who transferred to corvettes spent their first week convinced the vessel would capsize. It never did, but it never stopped threatening to either. 40 officers and ratings lived aboard a hull designed for a commercial crew of 15. Ratings slept in hammocks or bunks stacked 3 high with 14 inches of clearance. When the ship rolled, men wedged themselves in place with elbows and knees. Everything not lashed down became a projectile. Boots, tin mugs, tools. The engine room generated heat that turned adjacent spaces into Turkish baths, while compartments forward became refrigerators where condensation froze on the bulkheads. The single galley stove produced 1 hot meal per day when weather permitted. In winter storms, the crew existed on cold corned beef, hard biscuits, and tea that turned lukewarm within 90 seconds. Washing facilities consisted of a single saltwater pump and a bucket. Fresh water remained too precious for bathing. Most ratings went weeks without a proper wash. Clothing remained perpetually damp. Wool jerseys absorbed moisture, grew mildew, and rotted on men's backs. Sleep became a luxury rationed more carefully than rum. 4 hours on watch, 4 hours off. After 3 weeks at sea, the entire crew operated in exhaustion that made faces gray and hands tremble. Yet these floating bathtubs were learning to kill submarines. The early methods guaranteed failure more often than success. Steam over where you thought a U-boat lurked. Rolled depth charges off the stern. Hope. The fundamental problem was that Aztec lost contact when the attacking vessel closed within 200 yards. The corvette's captain steered blind, estimating where the submarine would be, ordering charges released based on guesswork and prayer. Meanwhile, the U-boat commander heard propeller noise growing louder, ordered emergency turns, changed depth, and twisted away. Conventional depth charge attacks resulted in kills roughly 5% of the time. 1 submarine sunk for every 20 attacks. The Royal Navy was fighting with a weapon that failed 95 times out of 100. Everything changed with the Hedgehog. a steel framework holding 24-spigot mortar. Each fired a 30-pound projectile shaped like an oversized lawn dart, fitted with a contact-fused warhead. The crucial innovation was that these projectiles fired forward, landing 200 yards ahead of the attacking corvette. The Aztec operator maintained contact throughout the attack, calling corrections right up until impact. The submarine dodged, the operator saw it, and the captain could adjust. If the projectiles missed, they sank without exploding, allowing immediate re-attack. If even one projectile hit the pressure hull, that 30-pound charge would punch through and detonate inside, where the shockwave had nowhere to dissipate. The first Hedgehogs reached corvettes in January 1943. The statistics that followed made naval tacticians reassess everything. Hedgehog attacks produced kills 25% of the time, a five-fold improvement that translated directly into U-boats destroyed and merchant ships saved. The weapon transformed corvette tactics from crude bludgeoning to precise stalking. Captains approached submarine contacts at reduced speed, maintaining Aztec contact while creeping into Hedgehog range. The slower approach gave submarine commanders false confidence. They heard propellers but misjudged range, assuming they had time for one more maneuver. Then 24 projectiles rained down and contact-fused warheads didn't care what they hit. February night, 1941. Convoy ONS 67 southwest of Iceland. HMS Sunflower. Lieutenant Commander James Prentice commanding. Aztec contact at 2,200 hours. Solid echo at 1,200 yards. U-552's commander went deep, leveling off at 400 feet while turning hard to starboard. Prentice tracked the maneuver, adjusted course, and released a 10-charge pattern. The sea erupted in white columns 50 feet high. No debris surfaced. Prentice circled and attacked again. 7 consecutive attacks over 90 minutes. Each one forcing U-552 deeper. Each one cracking more hull plates until high-pressure airlines ruptured. She broke surface at 0115 hours, conning tower bursting through in a fountain of spray. Sunflower's 4-inch gun put 3 rounds into the pressure hull before the U-boat slipped back under, mortally wounded. 49 German submariners trapped in sinking steel. 1 corvette, 90,000 pounds sterling. 1 U-boat destroyed. Arithmetic was working. HMS Snowflake achieved the rare double kill during Convoy HX-229 in February 1944. Lieutenant Harold Chesterman commanded the modified Flower-class vessel. It's one fitted with the new Hedgehog forward-throwing mortar. Aztec contact came at dawn. 2 separate echoes. 2 submarines positioning for a coordinated attack on the convoy's port flank. Chesterman engaged the nearer contact, approaching at 8 knots while his operators sang out ranges. 800 yards, 600 yards, 400 yards. At 250 yards, Chesterman ordered fire. 24 Hedgehog projectiles arced forward, splashing into the sea in their distinctive elliptical pattern. 5 seconds of silence. Then a muffled detonation. Contact fuse meeting pressure hull. U-734's forward torpedo room flooded instantly, dragging her bow down while compressed air screamed from ruptured tanks. Chesterman didn't wait to confirm the kill. The second submarine was maneuvering into firing position. He swung Snowflake hard to starboard, regained Aztec contact, and commenced another Hedgehog approach. U-264's commander tried to escape beneath a thermal layer at 300 feet. But Snowflake's operator adjusted for refraction and held contact. The second Hedgehog pattern went down at 0830 hours. 2 projectiles hit simultaneously, one striking the conning tower, another punching through the forward casing. Both submarines lay on the Atlantic floor before breakfast time, taking 96 submariners with them. Cost to His Majesty's Treasury, 24 Hedgehog projectiles at roughly 10 pounds each. Total, 240 pounds to destroy 2 submarines. The night of December 19, 1943, produced what convoy escort veterans called the Christmas miracle. Convoy HX-123 found itself caught in a Force 10 storm west of Ireland, while simultaneously under attack by Denotz's Eisenbart Wolfpack. 11 U-boats coordinating their assault. The Corvettes HMS Loosestrife, Clematis, and Polyanthus fought through waves that buried their forecastles, tacking aft at contacts while their crews clung to stanchions and prayed the next roll wouldn't be the one that finally capsized them. The storm became the escort's greatest ally. U-boats couldn't maintain position in the chaos, couldn't aim torpedoes accurately, couldn't even hold periscope depth without broaching or diving uncontrollably. Polyanthus detected U-261 attempting to surface for better visibility and caught her wallowing in the troughs between waves. A single depth charge pattern broke her back. Loosestrife forced U-382 so deep while evading that the submarine's hull imploded at 600 feet. Depth charges hadn't touched her. The pressure of the Atlantic did the Corvette's work regardless. 5 U-boats withdrew with damage. 2 never reported back to headquarters. The convoy lost 3 merchantmen, but 29 reached Liverpool. Cargo intact. Crews exhausted but alive. These actions represented not spectacular victories, but the grinding attrition that characterized the Atlantic campaign. Corvettes didn't win dramatic fleet actions. They won through persistence. Through maintaining station and weather that drove men mad. Through attacking again when the first attack failed. Through simply refusing to let submarines operate freely. The Admiralty maintained meticulous records of every convoy sailed, every escort assigned, every U-boat engagement from September 1939 through May 1945. Those ledgers, compiled by the Naval Historical Branch in the years following victory, revealed patterns that shocked traditionalists and vindicated the Corvette advocates. The raw statistics told a story that prestige and naval tradition couldn't obscure. Flower-class corvettes and their improved River-class successors participated in the confirmed destruction of approximately 60 German and Italian submarines. Destroyers operating in convoy escort roles claimed roughly 65 confirmed kills over the same period. At first glance, this appeared to validate the destroyer's superiority, until analysts divided those figures by the number of vessels engaged and the capital invested. The Royal Navy commissioned approximately 267 Flower-class corvettes at an average cost of £90,000 each, totaling roughly £24 million. The comparable destroyer force represented approximately 150 vessels, costing between £1.5 and £2 million each, totaling between £225 and £300 million invested. When reduced to cost per kill, each U-boat destroyed by corvette action cost Britain approximately £400,000 in vessel construction costs. Each U-boat destroyed by destroyer action cost approximately £3.5 to £4.6 million. The Corvette achieved submarine kills at roughly 1/10 the capital cost of destroyer kills. The economic efficiency gap remains staggering, even accounting for ammunition expenditure, fuel consumption, and maintenance. Critics argued this analysis ignored the destroyer's multi-role capability. They weren't entirely wrong. Destroyers could engage surface raiders, provide anti-aircraft screens for capital ships, conduct torpedo attacks against enemy heavy units. But the Battle of the Atlantic wasn't won by surface actions or torpedo strikes. It was won by ensuring more merchant ships reached port than U-boats could sink. In that specific mission, destroyer versatility became irrelevant. A 4.7-inch gun that could engage enemy cruisers at 20,000 yards served no purpose against a submerged U-boat at 600 yards. Speed that enabled fleet operations meant nothing when the mission required steaming at convoy pace for 3 weeks straight. The tonnage war reduced everything to arithmetic. Britain needed to import approximately 1 million tons of supplies weekly to survive. German U-boats needed to sink more than Britain could replace. Convoy escorts existed to shift that balance. Every convoy that crossed successfully represented victory. Whether it arrived unmolested because escorts deterred attacks or arrived bloodied but intact, Because escorts had killed the attackers, the vessel that achieved that result most economically won the war most efficiently. By late 1943, convoy success rates told the final story. Convoys with adequate corvette escort crossed with losses below 1% of merchant tonnage. Convoys with primarily destroyer escort showed identical loss rates. The expensive escort and the cheap escort achieved statistically identical results in the mission that mattered most. Dunitz didn't distinguish between corvette and destroyer depth charges. Both killed submarines equally dead. Neither did the merchantman whose cargoes kept Britain fighting. The Flower-class corvette had proven that effective naval power didn't require copying battleship traditions or destroyer prestige. It required understanding the mission and building the minimum vessel capable of accomplishing it. 47 Flower-class corvettes went to the breakers between 1945 and 1948. Another 63 soldiered on until replaced by purpose-built frigates in the early 1950s. 22 found civilian employment, converted to weather ships, fishery protection vessels, even merchant service. HMC Sackville survived as a museum ship in Halifax, the last Flower-class corvette in existence. Her cramped mess decks and tiny bridge preserved as testament to the men who fought in floating tin cans. The tactical lessons entered permanent naval doctrine. Forward-throwing weapons like Hedgehog evolved into Squid, then Limbo, then modern vertical launch anti-submarine rockets. The principle remained identical: maintain sensor contact throughout the attack. Deliver weapons ahead of the attacking vessel where they could be guided by real-time information. The corvette crews who developed these tactics while freezing in North Atlantic gales created the template that guided anti-submarine warfare into the missile age. Perhaps the greatest legacy was cultural. The Royal Navy entered the war believing only traditionally built warships crewed by career professionals could fight effectively. The corvettes proved that hostilities-only ratings clerks and miners and shop assistants in uniform could master complex tactics, maintain discipline under appalling conditions, and defeat professional enemy submariners through sheer bloody-minded persistence. The class distinctions that had defined the pre-war Navy eroded in corvette mess decks, where survival depended on competence rather than social background. The arithmetic that made corvettes essential remained brutally simple throughout. Britain couldn't afford to lose the Atlantic, couldn't afford unlimited destroyer construction, couldn't afford to wait for perfect solutions. The corvette represented the possible rather than the ideal. Cheap enough to build by the hundred, simple enough to crew with civilians, adequate enough to sink submarines. Not the best warship ever designed, but perhaps the most necessary, arriving exactly when needed in quantities that made victory achievable. Admiral Sir Max Horton, who commanded Western approaches through the crucial battles of 1943, summarized the corvette's contribution in his post-war memoir with typical British understatement. They were uncomfortable, unmannerly, and utterly indispensable. The unglamorous vessels that saved Britain when glamour alone would have meant defeat.